Hi, and welcome back. Thanks for joining us in our ever-deepening journey into the frontier of source life. And we enter now our 17th consecutive ever-deepening meditation, guided meditation. This is not a lecture, it's not about information, it's a journey into source. It's a long quest of our human drama through the ages, the call of the infinite force, by whatever name we use, is moving every pulse of life, every event, every development, every stage in our human development and breakthroughs is all under the influence of the call of this infinite source. And to see that, in a way, the amazing journey of all of our great traditions over the last, let's say, 25 years, just to pick an arbitrary cutoff point, but it goes way back. But if we look at our human journey with global eyes, source eyes, across the planet, it's astounding to see what has been moving our great traditions. And in this 17th meditation, we've been looking at two or three monumental questions that have never been asked in this way before from the source, with the source code. And the visual behind me, we've been trying to get more familiar with it, is trying to give us a map, a matrix, a gold print, a blueprint of our human journey over the last 3,000 years in one visual, one meditative visual. And I'll turn in a moment and start to recall at the end of 15, I was suggesting that it has been a monumental task for our teachers who are going into the source language, the deeper code, the source code, which taps the infinite, where everything is connected and in a deep unified force. And how do we bring that teaching and vision of reality as it's seen there in the deep space, in the source vision, down into the language development of our everyday cultures where we folks live, and the language we use and the matrix that holds us and gives us our capacity to think and to reason and to make sense and to have truth and events and experience and to metabolize our world in our language space. There are two profoundly different stages of language development. And we've been talking about that. And the journey from one space, our everyday common sense cultures, using that technology, which we call a motherboard. There's a matrix, or whatever name we use. It is a mind operating process. It's a technology of consciousness and word processing, a technology of language, of mind, of minding, of consciousness, where we make our worlds and our lives and our stories and narratives. and that we haven't seen that there is a deep implant, matrix, or code, or program, to borrow language from the digital analog, where we understand there's a program governing our capacity to use our computer power, word power in the computer. Analogous to that, there is a Microsoft for the mind, for culture making, life making, and everything is working in that program. And it's a code, it's a matrix, it's a mind operating process. And so all of our thoughts, everything we think, everything we make sense in that space, we're using a code. And we've been looking at the motherboard, and to see that our great teachers who are going deeper and crossing into a deeper dimension with the source code, tapping it, Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Lao Tzu, to mention a few of the early startup geniuses who are seeing that the Tao in the deep space is not the Tao in our everyday common sense language. We've got to cross languages. We've got to upgrade our technology of word, of language, of lens of the mind, of interpretation, of making sense, of reason. It's a deeper form of rational coherence to go into the deeper language. So one of the great dramatic points in the evolutionary drama that we've been opening up our journey to source, we're suggesting that when we have the source code in the global light, that we're able to see an evolutionary story that was eclipsed before. We couldn't see it. It was out of sight because we couldn't see beyond our own matrix into the deeper source code that our great teachers were obviously tapping in some way and hitting the amazing challenge of trying to communicate that language level down to our everyday level of language and rational and word and cognitive development. Crossing that boundary from the matrix or the motherboard that's a smotherboard that is an I-it language. All of our information, beliefs, as we've seen, is an I-it matrix, and the higher, deeper, more powerful word processing technology is I-thou, where the thinker cannot be separated from all that appears. It's all interwoven. You can't break the circuits in the I-thou space, the double brackets and the single brackets. And those two dimensions were not fully brought out. Our great geniuses were seeing and feeling the difference between the deeper language and our everyday language, and how do we cross higher? How do we help our people to make the great migration crossing into the deep field where we flourish, and we can end our suffering by the matrix, the smotherboard that dominates us. So there's a profound intertranslation challenge between the matrix that dominates our cultures for centuries. Let's call it 2,500 years to the present. And what we're going to do in this 17th meditation, stay with us and let's go for it. I'm going to really move very fast, because over the last 5-6 decades, my whole life has been focused on following the trail from Socrates all the way through the European amazing story of our great geniuses in the European lineage, from the Greek origins of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, all the way through to our modern present philosophical narratives of the 20th and now into the 21st century. What's been happening? What's driving it? Are they just scattered, or is there something pulling us, calling us, that you'd see as we move? And we're going to show with source vision a connected evolutionary driver. There's a force, the infinite force is calling us. Living under the influence, LUI I call it in an earlier meditation. LUI, living under the influence of the infinite force, the infinite word, the infinite code, calling every pulse of life. You can't step outside of that energy field. It's operating at every moment, on all of us, all the time. And we don't have to use God talk. We could use reason, logic, science for the source code. It's an infinite force field. So we can speak in divine language, but we don't have to. We could use the language of ontology, the science of being, and logos, logic and ontology, ontologic, the science of being. And we're all in that. It's a science of reality. Can we get the DNA for reality? So I know this is challenging, and what we're facing in the 17th meditation is a quick flash to see with source vision that we couldn't see before. Wow, there's a deep drive pulling us from the early Greek founding of the European traditions. And I'm not just singling that alone, we'll see in a moment. There are many different pathways you can take, but all the way through into the contemporary European imagination and philosophical narratives and wisdom, trying to understand our human condition and trying to get to deep truth and rationality. We could also follow the line from Buddha 2,500 years ago, Buddha's enlightenment, which was seeing that if we're in the matrix of this motherboard, the I-it space matrix, thought form that dominates our culture and our lives, we're going to suffer because it's de-sourced. It cuts us off from access to the source of reality, to primary being, to our primary self. We're cut off from ourself. So Buddha's medicine was to try and, when he awoke in awakening, Buddha's enlightenment, we'll see in a moment, and he coded it in 4 noble axioms, but he couldn't translate them into everyday speech and language. That would blow it. He had to find a way to communicate the power of these source axioms from his Buddha science, the Dharma, the laws that Buddha saw, where everything is interconnected in infinite flow, to communicate it to everyday people who don't have that technology yet. How do you break that barrier? And it took 2,500 years for the tradition that adores and venerates Buddha's teaching and honors it to stop putting it in our matrix, but it's trying to find a way to cross into the higher Buddha space. And we're still hitting the walls. It's astounding. We're going to look at that. So we'll follow the Buddha trail. We'll follow the Socrates European trail into the contemporary, a 2,500-year journey that's connected. If you reach a certain level and you're still not getting it, The force calls and it goes deeper. It has to go deeper. There's the infinite source call is operating at every moment in history. In the hidden evolution, this is a new story. It's not been seen this way because you need the global Unum code, the global source code, in order to see the connections we couldn't see before. They were eclipsed. They were there, but we couldn't see them. And now we can see them with source double bracket lens. We could look at the Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, all the way through. In the biblical children of Abraham lineage, even though it's diverse, the Judaic tradition and the Kabbalah, the mystical Kabbalah, and it unfolds into the contemporary world. The Christian as it unfolds to the Catholic and the Protestant, into the Quakers, for example. And all of the great mystics that were trying to struggle with this and to see into the Christ space, into the God space. The God word was deeper. The Gospel of Thomas, the missing Gospels, the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gnostic tradition is an incredible lineage. What's going on? What's driving it to in the evolution of the Catholic faith, the universal faith, into the Protestant? What ignited the Protestant Reformation? What was it trying to do? And what would lead the Protestant Reformation, which has a profound political implications from breaking away from the dominance of the Catholic leadership and the Pope, to have a more direct, independent access to God? And then the Quakers emerged, for example. What led Quakers to say, we don't need the church, we don't need ministers, the Christ is within us. Let us sit together and allow the Christ to speak. Something is driving that all the way through to the 20th century. And so whether we follow it through Muhammad and the Quran and the centuries of evolution to get the surrender to Allah, to the infinite source, the infinite Unum of Allah, and then you get beautiful, profound philosophical mystics like Rumi saying that there's a field beyond judgment and beliefs and polar breakdowns and belief systems. In that field, I'll meet you there. That's where our genius is appointed. We've got to cross into this space. We could follow that trail, and we'll talk about this in a moment. We're going to do a guided meditation to just with Unum power, with this lens, because when you're here in this matrix, that was the focus of all the way through, from the first guided meditation all the way to 15, and now from number 16 last time we said let's focus on this because this is a game changer. We cannot see this mark here, this dark red-black mark is indicating the single bracket. It's a technology of language, word power, reason, consciousness. The lens of the mind is a technology, like a digital program. So it's a matrix that's controlling our capacity to see and to have meaning and thoughts and feelings and beliefs and paradigms and narratives. All of it is coming from that technology. It allows us to see. But with that vision, we can't see the matrix that makes it possible. That's a paradox. That's the bind. We need to step out of this into the deeper lens. We have to step back. Now we can see it from here. We can't see it within here. This is where we live. So I'm still working with this meditative visual because it does sum up. I know it could be very confusing, especially if you're joining us now in the 17th consecutive guided meditation. You have the access on the playlist to all from number 1. It's all there, deeper and deeper and deeper. We're journeying deeper in a new frontier. This picture has never been developed this way before. The double bracket is a breakthrough. It's saying, okay, we've got to find a way to mark when we're in the infinite zone, the deep code, the missing code. That's the double bracket in blue, right? That's an infinite marker. Right? It's not just a marker on paper. It indicates a technology of interconnectivity where you're in the I am space, where you're I aming. We are in the connected flow. We're zoning it, to use that metaphor from the athletic peak performance. When we tap the zone and we're not really in the box, we break out of the box and we're somehow entering into this language technology. This double bracket is the integral holistic technology of infinitely connected reality, being, life, language, thought, reason. And single bracket is the technology that has been dominating us and holding us here in this cultural space for millennia. And we've been struggling to break the barrier and cross over. So this line comes with this technology, the matrix of talking about things. Here is consciousness, I'm the thinker, and I see the content, the beliefs, the information. The it, everything is an it, a piece of information. I am hungry, I am thirsty, I am angry. My feelings are itified. I articulate them in this code, and it's information for me. And everything is informationized. And in a way, our digital, as we saw last time, again, it's obvious, our digital thought form of digital language, where I can Google the information, that's Google here. If I Google God, I'll get this. I won't get that. You can't Google this. If Buddha speaks from the deep field, we can't bring it down to our language. That's what we've been doing. And our great teachers over the centuries are saying, no, it's not good enough. It's not God enough. We're not getting it. We've got to go deeper. And that's this line. We've got to make the crossing. So at the end of 15, remember, we said, how do we translate across these two matrices? This is one matrix, this is another. This is I, it, this is I, thou. I, it, we stand back. Consciousness, the subject who is thinking has an object of thought. Subject, object. I, it. Everything is in the it box, including us. Because if you ask me, who am I give you my information. I'm a man, a citizen, I'm a teacher, I'm a father, and we produce ourselves here. My feelings, my narrative, my story, my ID is here. We objectify ourselves. Our great teacher says, if you do that, if this is where you live and not here, this is not objectified, this is a flow. The I and the object or whatever is no longer an object in the box. It is an intimate interlink and woven together because of the infinite Unum. So these are points that have not yet been seen clearly in our evolution. That the infinite is infinitely Unum, infinitely one. Not one here. This language cannot capture the Unum. Infinite Unum is infinite pluribus. That means all possibilities. Pluribus means the vast, boundless diversity of realities and worlds and cultures and events and galaxies, whatever. Fiction, fact, it's all within the field of the infinite. It cannot be outside of the infinite, and you cannot multiply the infinite. It's infinitely one, and therefore everything is held together in connectivity. But to get to that interconnectivity, we've got to cross this barrier that is produced by the matrix that is an I-it matrix, to talk about it. Let's call it the information matrix. And information here is disinformation, because if I put the pen here and I tell you about the pen, then I see the pen here from the I am lens, from the double bracket technology. It's a different pen. It's much deeper than we ever imagined. Everything changes when we put it in the double bracket space. So information is disinformation. If I put God here, I'm not getting God. If I put Jesus here, I'm not getting Jesus. If I put Buddha's teaching from here, he sees, and his four great axioms, his noble truths of source science, Buddha science, cannot be down translated into our language as bullet points. We cannot speak of the Buddha's four noble truths as 4 bullet points. I want the information. Existence is suffering, it has a cause, we have a choice, and we can overcome it. We could do that, but we're missing completely the journey into the Buddha space. If we informationize the gospel, the speech of Jesus as the logos in the flesh, here, Jesus is the double bracket speaking. It's a Christ technology, the word in the flesh. How do we translate it into our gospel, into our story? This is where we make our stories. So if we talk about Jesus and the historical Jesus, and we talk about the beliefs and the teachings, and we download the teachings into what we understand in our matrix, are we really getting Jesus? Are we really getting the word of God? If Moses at the burning bush, here's the burning bush. This is where Moses stood before the infinite, the I am of Yahweh, and saw the laws as Buddha does, the Dharma, of interconnect, and how do I bring it down? How do I translate this to the people? To the tribes below, the tribal people below. When I come down from the mountain, how do I do this? Who sent me? I am that I am, says this voice. So the language and technology of the burning bush cannot be easily downloaded into the language of every day. If you write it on the tablet, you write the laws of God in stone, it's not going to be the living word, the living commands of love, and to honor and love the source with all our being. It just can't be. So there's a deep and serious question of translatability between the source code and this motherboard code. So what we'll do in this moment, just bear with me, and it's going to go very fast. I already started doing it, but I wanted to kind of to stir up in our meditation, in our guided meditation, the many different issues, fundamental issues that we haven't seen clearly before in this way. That's I'm really insisting on that the double brackets is new and the single bracket is new. The single bracket, calling this out and giving this picture, has not been done with this articulate clarity before. And I have been suggesting that's what our great geniuses were trying to help us see that. But they themselves didn't fully bring it out to say, oh, there's a double bracket, infinite space of connect. And then there's a space in which our language and our words and our thoughts and belief systems and paradigms and narratives and identities are still cut off from the deeper know thyself. So we follow the lineage, the 2500 lineage from Socrates, who saw that the beliefs that we have here is not knowledge. We've got to enter the logos. The word I use, the logosophia, the logos, is the Greek word for the infinite light of reason, the source, where we find coherence, which is beyond knowledge and truth. Knowledge and truth as we know it here cannot tap the logos. We've got to go deeper into the light of the logos, which is a kind of rational enlightenment. And Plato, the student of Socrates, was seeking to articulate that in his great dialogues, where he brought Socrates to life. And in his great dialogue, The Republic, is highly relevant today because in the quest for justice, how do we understand justice in the Republic? And what Plato saw with Socrates is that until wisdom lives in the leadership and in the culture, we will not have justice. And we have to ask ourselves, have we, say, in the American scene, is there wisdom, genuine wisdom, which is what? Wisdom is here. Are we getting the Logos code of compassion and the laws of human interconnectivity with self and other and nature, where everything is sacred? This is sacred space, and this is cut off from sacred space. Have we gotten the wisdom? Because if we try to get wisdom in the information space, we blow it. It shows that we haven't gotten wisdom, because we'll see over and over with these great traditions, we're knocking at this door, crossing. This is the crossing into wisdom here. Enlightenment, knowledge, truth, meaning, ethics here. So this is very serious. And I've been suggesting that the matrix, the single bracket, that marks it. So this visual of we're always in the infinite field, we cannot hear. Whatever happens in any culture, in any worldview, whatever science, whatever atheism, whatever nihilism, whatever view you have, you cannot be outside of the infinite logosphere. And every point is sacred and infinite and connected. Here too. The points here, this line is our doing. There really is, in reality itself, there is no cutoff. We've suggested that in deep ontology science, that this line is the sin boundary. Sin is the deep rift with source that keeps us out of the connectivity and one with the source. In the East, samsara, this line is huge historically. When we look at our great traditions, whether we call it samsara or sinsara, just to put a playful connection, as we've done in our early meditations. That's for real. How do we cross? And it's been known for centuries, the great struggles. Can we, the people here, use our wits and our intelligence to cross over? Can I will myself to cross into the zone? Or do I have to somehow let go of something deep in order to be accessible to my higher self, to enlightenment, to awakening? Is it something I do from the ego-based place? This is the ego space and this is the self. So what we're seeking to do, several things we're juggling together. And I hope it's not too confusing, but it's all important. Because if this source science, this is a visual of source science that we haven't had, that we haven't called out and noticed there is a thought form, a technology that took millennia to evolve to where we are for information, to control the fire here. Meaning, language, words, signs, symbols, mythologies, beliefs, paradigms, codes, all going on here. And we saw last time that this code is enormous. There's no limit to it. We can have boundless alternative subcodes within the code, within the matrix. The single bracket matrix is a machine, a code machine. There's something machine-like about it because it's not organic. It's like a computer that can generate boundless alternative codes. English has a code, it has a grammar. French has a code. French grammar. A grammar is a code. What is a code? It is a system of rules to interpret and process whatever shows up. So when we're playing games, for example, baseball, it's coded. A home run makes sense in the matrix, the code of the baseball game. Chess, checkmate. That's a move in the game. That's a whole other system of rules. Football, soccer, tennis, track and field. Wherever you go, it's all coded. What's a code? They're rules and conventions. Those are all the meanings of codes. So the matrix is a deep code. There is a motherboard, a code of all our codes. And we saw, it's an astounding clarity that the single bracket matrix can generate boundless alternative codes and paradigms and worldviews and cultures and languages and paradigms. You can keep going, and stories, you can multiply them and change your story, change what's appearing in the box. If you change your story, you change who you are. We know that. And our coaches are saying, change your story, and change your life. Think positive, and you change your lifestyle. And we get all of our coaching here. But where is the coaching that calls this out? If we don't call out the motherboard, the matrix, and therefore see there's a barrier, and that our teachers are speaking here, from here, to us, and we need to upscript. We can't download, we've got to upscript. That's not being said. And that is being implied by our 2,500 year, when we look from Socrates all the way through to Martin Heidegger, for example. We're going to go through that in a moment. You go from Buddha, 2,500 years, all the way to Zen, to the Kyoto school of Zen, seeking to understand the technology of Buddha. Why has it been so difficult? And why is a Zen master teacher who's seeking to help the audience understand to Zen is to be mindful? When you chop wood, chop wood. When you carry water, carry water. When you eat, eat. Whatever you do it mindfully in Zen space. That's how we flourish and live, not what we do in our ego-based attempts. So all of these are very serious insights into, wow, have we humans, with all of the access to our wisdom and science and technologies and all that we've had, have we been really laboring in a motherboard without realizing it? And why is it that the great teachers are seeing we're hitting something's wrong here? And seeking to diagnose it, and it wasn't diagnosed this way. No one has said, check out the single bracket technology. It was implied in certain ways at the best moments, but it wasn't called out as a technology across the planet for all of our worlds and narratives where cultures live. So these red mark, black and red mark, are very important. We've been focusing, we need to understand, how do I see that? Because we see in the box, we can't see what's causing us to see. So the vision here blinds us to the source vision. That's why this is new. Because when you have the double brackets no longer rolled in and conflated into the single bracket space. It cannot be swallowed by the single brackets. It makes it impossible. It's a tripper. It is an alarm system. The double bracket says, can't go. You can't download here. Off limits. It blocks it. It's a blocker. It's a download blocker. Because now I see, oh, it's a whole different technology. I can't do that. That's not just crude. It's incompetent. It's just bad science to try to download this code into our terms. So all of these points are game changers for humanity, because if we've been living our human cultures here, and our great teachers speaking from whether it's Moses, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, on, are speaking this language to us and urging us to stop the suffering, stop the eclipse, and move into the place of high culture. And yet we keep hitting the wall because we didn't see it. We couldn't see it. It wasn't being brought out clearly. Single bracket, double bracket is something that we've not had before. And double bracket is an integral holistic vision, an Unum power that can see links. And so that's what I want to show and work with you now. I hope it's making sense. When we say the word matrix or code, you're getting a sense of what a code is. A code is any system of rules or any rules. Even you say the word red, it's coded. Why? Because we all know how to use the word red. It's a rule of how we make a move in a game. When I say this is red, or I use the word red. And it's not just the word red, but red itself is coded. Everything is coded. Why? Because the infinite code of the infinite, because it's infinitely Unum, permeates into every possibility. Every grain of sand here is coded. Infinity in a grain of sand. In every electron. In everything we perceive, every sound, every fragrance, every percept is coded. Every word is coded. Signs are coded. So I hope you're getting to see that. So if you can't break a piece of Ohm. If this is the Ohm field, you can't break a piece of Ohm. You're going to have Ohm. It's fractal. Fractal is understanding the deep science here. Fractal means every point is interconnected. And you can't break apart a piece. Every portion we try to break apart with this technology is going to still be coded. So everything here is coded. So I am coded with myself. And we saw that earlier. The single bracket I is surrounded by the double bracket me. But I can't get to me because the I dominates me. The single bracket dominates. It's a tyrannical kind of hold on my mind and our perception and my culture and my own story. That's what our great teachers saw. The single bracket technology is a matrix that holds us captive in objectifying everything, including ourselves, in an I-it language form. But if we go into the awakened self, the deep self, the source self, where I'm flowing in the source, in the zone of being, of the word, then my intelligence opens up with I-thou. Everything is interflow. I'm interconnected with it. That's the I-thou space of the infinite interconnectivity. And here, this is a disconnection. And we haven't really seen that clearly, and it's holding us back. And it is the source of abysmal suffering, chronic, deep, existential suffering. However we look at our medical diagnostic here within this space, there's a deeper medicine of our great teachers like Buddha and Jesus and Krishna. When you do the yoga here, your suffering here, your existential suffering and symptoms are removed with the intervention of the double bracket awakened intelligence. So the first eye, the third eye, the first eye opens, you can see connections, and your being changes. Because we are as we mind. If we mind with a single bracket matrix, we are single bracket entities. If we mind with a double bracket awakened, integral, holistic technology of yoga, of Christ, of Buddha, of Moses, of Lao Tzu, then we are living an integral flow. Our being changes if we change our technology of being. So my existence here is not the same as my existence here. This is samsara, this is nirvana. And the kingdom of nirvana, the kingdom of God, is at hand. It's right here. But we're blocked with the technology. So we several things we have to do and are seeking to do in this 17th meditation. And we keep going deeper, hopefully, every time in the guided meditation. Because I'm not trying... Obviously, I can't give information. I can't give bullet points. Here's your takeaway. Here's your toolkit. No, that's totally inadequate. Because making this crossing is the whole point of a meditation. Meditation is the journey into source. This is meditation. This is predication. Talk about it. And if you try to meditate here, you blocked it. If you try to do yoga here, you're not doing yoga. This is yoga. If you're looking at the Christ here and worshiping here, you're not getting to the Christ. If you're looking at the Buddha's teaching here and revering the Buddha here, you're missing the Buddha. And so on. Same with science. If you're doing your science here, and your science is under the smotherboard, which it is, because everything in the culture is, this is deep and widespread. Has science called out the technology of word and thought, where we look at the facts and have our lens of Newton or Einstein, and the lens we have to make our facts, and look at the facts and interpret? Our lens interprets, and we use our lens here. Our lens is controlled by the single bracket. Smotherboard. If science is in a smotherboard, it can't see reality clearly. If there's a deeper, and it's amazing, it's science. And this is one of the lineages I want to speak about. Look at the evolution and development of science. It's magnificent. Science is fantastic as a technology of knowing, with experimental hypotheses and checking against a fact empirically to see and get collaborative evidence and corroboration and build a consensus and deepen your paradigm from Newton to Einstein. So Einstein's world shows up in a deeper way than Newton. If you have a Newton lens, you have a Newton world. You have an Einstein lens. If you go to Hawking's and you begin to see in theoretical physics beyond quantum into black holes and non-locality and superluminary velocities and the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is here, where everything is interconnected. That's non-locality. Locality is here because space is here, but space-time is here. So science too gets stunted by this motherboard. And if we could open up the lens, and of all places, because science celebrates technology, and all of our technologies, all of the magnificent MRIs and cell phones and jets and telecommunications, you name it, medical technology, all of these great, amazing digital technology and iPhones, all of this that is coming out, it's coming out of the motherboard. But here's the point. This motherboard thinks it's doing it, but it couldn't do it without the source. Nothing can happen without the source. Science couldn't be science without the source. And yet what science ironically does is to deny the source. By saying the materialistic world of the Big Bang is a way to understand, and the Big Bang comes out of the cosmology of the motherboard. It says, the way to explain the visible universe is the Big Bang is the origin of the cosmos, and it's stardust to us. And that's the best we can do with science. What if that story is giving us a materialistic ideology here and completely missing the depth of reality and being of our great geniuses across the planet in deep ontology? Has modern science worked out its deep ontology, first science, the source science, with the lens? If you go from vision with the eye to a microscope or a telescope, how about the holoscope of the mind? That's double brackets. And you would think that science would treasure to say, wow, we've got a whole new way of encountering reality in the non-locality of the continuum of reality, to discern the interconnectivity where the mind of the scientist and all of nature and phenomena are interflow. That would be magnificent science, waiting to happen with the access to the source code. So I'm already in this warm-up is giving a sense of wherever you look in these lineages, now with the source vision, you could see, wow, the source effect, this force, this arrow, this force is operating at every moment in all of our lives, and all of us, all the time. Living under the influence, LUI, we cannot not. If we say the greatest force is not gravity, it's sourcity, it's logos force. The infinite force is operating. It cannot not operate in every grain of sand, in every electron, in every moment, in every breath we take. It's funding it. We couldn't live without it. We're not honoring it. We can't see it because of our dominant matrix. It cuts us off. That's what this line is, from celebrating and honoring. And yet in our great spiritual journey, the call to Abraham of Yahweh, what is the call? Love me with all you've got. Honor me. And that's put in biblical terms and religious terms, but it's science. You can use deep ontology. What is the highest intelligence of reason to honor the first? That's the first philosophy. named by Aristotle, but practiced all the way through across the planet. Lao Tzu is doing first philosophy, Buddha is doing first philosophy, Krishna is doing first philosophy, yoga philosophy. It's all getting the language of the DNA for the first. Which is what? Honor the first. Which is what? Honorable knowledge. And knowledge here is tainted with this motherboard. It's all happening within this motherboard, which is cutting us off from a deeper access into the source. So all of these questions are saying, how do we translate? How do we make our crossing then from single bracket matrix to the double bracket holistic matrix? This is finite, this is infinite. This is I it, this is I thou. This is colonized, this is free. It's huge. And the point to follow from that, the source point is everything is being sourced, but, even though we can't see it. And our journey is to go from the dominance of the matrix of the single bracket into the double bracket awakened mind of our high self. We all have a double bracket self that's getting eclipsed and violated by our slasher, our slash code. The I-it code has dominated human cultures, civilization. In the American story, for example, just to take an example, we could go to Russia, we could go to China, in African nations, South America, wherever we go, across the planet, all through Europe. The single bracket has to be contended with as the dominant technology. So if we look at the American experiment and the birthing of this holy experiment of 1776, and these visionaries who are tapping the wisdom and saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And if any matrix or any political band or any convention or contracts, whatever you name it, that violates our humanity of life, liberty, happiness, nobility of a dignified person, and is making us less than a person by objectifying us, if we're doing that, it's our duty to separate. As we saw in our fifth meditation, the unfinished American Revolution, evolution, is to realize that it's not a matter of freeing ourselves from the monarchy of Britain and British rule so we can be free of the British. That's not what the Declaration of Independence is. It's independence of being lodged within the colonized mental cultural space. A colonized culture is not a free culture. So America in the double bracket space, democracy here, we the people, pluribus unum, here is not the same as democracy here, where things are broken and fragmented and polarized and dysfunctional. As we could look at the facts around us in the state of our democracy in America, for example, things are in shambles. It's not we the people. And it cannot be. That's a medical symptom. The disintegration of democracy. And so if we use the double bracket lenses, so what has happened in the founding of America? Well, there was slavery. That's objectifying humans and owning them. Well, that's not good. We've got to go higher. Stop slavery. Women can't vote. No, women are equal. Women can vote. Civil rights, apartheid. No, we have to end civil rights and desegregation. What's moving that? The Logos. The infinite force is operating every moment. So what's a driver of American evolution from the founding over 200 years ago, where it was clear that we found it, and we found it in principles here, but we're living in an alienated space that was out of sync and integrity with the deeper founding constitutional principles. We're all created equal by the source and endowed with unalienable rights of life, liberty, freedom. That talk is here. And if this is the constitutional vision and we're living in this constitutional space, then we're still not performing the independence, which is to separate from this and migrate into the high space of democracy. Which is to say that, I'm just using lab examples. If we look at science, well, the emergence of science after the dominance of ontology and first philosophy as an alleged queen of the sciences, and rather Bacon and Locke and Hume, and the founding of empirical science as a way of knowing and seeing the science evolve over the centuries to where it is now. What's driving science? Why do we go from Ptolemy to Copernicus, from Newton to Einstein, from Einstein beyond? What's pushing it? It's the source. It's a call of the source to discover nature See nature with double bracket eyes. Why? Because that's the infinite force. The infinite force presides over every narrative we've got. And all of our narratives are in this space. Theism, atheism. The opposites always together in this space. This spawns opposites. So the pattern of history, if you go to one, you get the opposite. And that's been going on for centuries, back and forth, swinging between, is it this or not? Is it S or not S? Is it P or not P? But they're both still in the same space. So source science, Unum science, which is new, I'm suggesting, because until you get the double brackets and access this code, which means you've got to call out the single bracket and step back from it and cross in to that space, until we get that, we are cut off from access to reality and being and word. So the theme I'm really sharing with you is that we're always living under the influence of the infinite force. It's always operating on us, and it's calling us to move relentlessly, inexorably into this space. That's been the missing evolutionary. That's a new and missing evolutionary story. To be able to see with Unum eyes, because now that I have the Unum, the unified, I can see, wow, look at the thread. From Buddha all through the centuries, the struggle, Nagarjuna, the genius, to say we're still in the box, we've got to get out. You know, all the way through to Nepal, Tibet, China, Japan, Zen. And Zen is trying to get the code for Zen space here. And the Zen master teacher Nishida, the founder of the Kyoto school in the 20th century, trying to get the logic of Buddha space and seeing that this logic is not the same as this logic. The matrix here, the Zen matrix is not the same. And hitting this wall because trying to communicate the Zen logic to the ego-based I-it logic doesn't work. And that's why Buddha despaired of teaching. As it said, Buddha despaired of teaching. You would think that this genius who's enlightened would have no problem saying, I'm going to communicate my axioms, my Buddha source science, primary science, medical science, to end the suffering. I'll communicate it to everyday people. Not so easy. So 2,500 years of struggle to really call it out, and we still haven't gotten the single bracket clearly enough to say, wow, the double bracket has been swallowed by the single bracket and we can't get out. And that's what this guided meditation to source life is. It says, okay, let's open it up. Let's find a way to open up the deeper technology and call out the smotherboard. Because if we don't, we're stuck. That's one of the greatest lessons from source science, source history, from our new evolutionary story we didn't have before. We're able to now see and connect dots we couldn't connect before. This is the dot connector, and this is the dot disconnector. It scatters, and we can't link. For example, the story from Moses to Jesus, Mohammed, the Catholic Church, and the Protestant and the Quakers, that 2,500 year, there's a logic unfolding. The logic of the source is calling that evolution. Or going from Buddha to Nagarjuna, early Buddhism, then Nagarjuna say, we're not getting it, we're still here, you've got to go the middle way. The middle way is a crossing into this. That's Nagarjuna. 150 AD in the Indian Buddhist tradition. Nagarjuna saw it. We're still in the wrong place. We're using the wrong matrix to get the Buddhist teaching. We have to go here. And still, we didn't understand Nagarjuna in making the crossing because these were conflated. Our great teachers didn't, when Jesus was speaking the Christ voice to the disciples, and unless you die, you can't be born again, and speaking Christ science, source science, the Logos in the flesh, the Logos code, and the disciples who were living in this space couldn't get it. Do you mean I have to enter my mother's womb again? They couldn't process it. And Buddha and Jesus too didn't despair, but he certainly got frustrated in trying to communicate across this boundary. And saying, for those who have ears, let them hear. What are ears? Double bracket ears. When you open your ears, you can hear, you can listen. It's a technology. If you get the Christ technology, you can listen, you can hear, you can speak. And Jesus was speaking and embodying. I am the way, the truth, and the life. That is source speak. Buddha is speaking from this source. Krishna is speaking the yoga technology from this source. Socrates is saying, this is not knowledge. I want the logos. I'm not there, but I know that that's where we have to go, into the logos of reason. Let's turn on the reason. Leave the caves. What's the cave? A single bracket space. Why? Because all you can have here is your own belief. Why? Because you're thinking you're sourcing it, and you're cut off from the real source. And when you're cut off and desourced, that's the whole point. When you're desourced, you're lost. The best you can have is your opinion, and that's sophistry. So even what we call science and truth, my truth is my truth, but if you take it to be truth, truth is here. When Jesus says, I am the truth, he wasn't talking about truth as we know it. Snow is white is true, if snow is white. That's a sentence, that's true, and there's a fact. How can Jesus be the truth? Well, when you cross into the source code, you cannot separate the thinker from the thinking, from the language, from the word. You are one with the word. So that's why he's saying, I am the truth, I am the way, I am the life. That's an example of source speaking. So when Jesus says, for those of you, let them hear, he was frustrated because he was seeing that, how do I get those who I want to help, to the blind to see? There's a blindness here, and to get the blind to see, they've got to open up the Christ vision. And if you say, well, believe in me, but beliefs are here. Because when I have a belief, I have a bullet point. I believe that Jesus died for me, and I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and I believe that Jesus saves. These beliefs don't get you into the Christ. To follow the Christ, to believe, is to enter into the Christ word. That's the upscript into the Christ code. That's a higher matrix, the Christ matrix. So when we speak of the Jesus code and the Moses code and the Buddha code and the God code, all those are words. They're not codes here in this matrix. It's a code of entering into the infinite source code, which has boundless expressions, but they're all coming to the same high space of high culture. I know I'm going fast, and I hope you're with me, because I'm trying to show that everything is always being sourced. We're always in the space. So at every point, in any point, if you had to revisit history and say what has been driving the evolution up to the point of the founding of the American 1776 vision of the high space, and we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evidence is here. When you have truth here, you've got to get the evidence. The axioms here are immediately clear when you're here, but you have to be in the high space of the logos to see the self-evident truth of life, liberty, happiness, well-being, and human dignity. The humans are here, and this is we the people. Pluribus unum. That mantra on the American penny. E pluribus unum. Out of the many, the one. Here, diversity, individuality, with justice and dignity for all. That's source code. That's source democracy. So wherever we look in history, what's led up to the French Revolution? What's led up to developments in Germany, in German history, and the Holocaust, and all of the genius of our great German thinkers, like Kant and Hegel, and Nietzsche, Heidegger. Amazing geniuses who are struggling at the height of Heidegger's life. In his early life, he was trying to understand the language of Sein und Zeit, being in time. His first book was trying to understand being here, and then he realized something is wrong. And then his mature work was crossing into the space of the word. His early mature books are saying we're still not in the word, we're still not thinking, double bracket. We're meditative beings, he says. Meditative beings are here. Predicative beings are here. He was trying to find a language to help the high point of European philosophy over 2,500 years, from Socrates and before Socrates, Heraclitus and Parmenides. These geniuses are trying to get to the source code and get the DNA for it. So there's an example, if you follow the trail. When Descartes, I know I'm jumping, but I guess I'm doing it in a juggling way, following the trail from Socrates all the way through to say Heidegger or Jacques Derrida, Jean-Paul Sartre, to mention a few. What are they struggling with? With an être et néant, being a nothingness of Sartre, and existentialism, and Camus, for example. What's going on? Huge genius events unfolding through the ages. When Descartes, for example, here's a great example. When René Descartes, mathematical genius, stood back and looked at his life and his belief systems, and said, is there anything that I know with certainty? Is there any deep foundation to my knowledge? He was shaken because he saw in this space that he could doubt whatever belief, or even mathematics. He could be dreaming. Why? Because the thinker, Descartes, was outside of the object of thought, the it. His beliefs were it. They were itified. And you could always have an intervention between the thinker and what is thought, and a demon of doubt can deceive you and influence your lens, because you're always interpreting. That's one of the great principles. To live in this matrix is to always interpret. To live is to interpret. To interpret is to use your lens, to make a judgment call, to read it and use a code and decode it in your way with your lens. So when Ptolemy decodes the solar system and Copernicus decodes the solar system and Newton and Einstein, it changes. Excuse me. So when Descartes saw he could doubt everything here, and the demon of deception can influence my mind and control what I see because it's objectified, I could always be wrong. So he saw this, all of this culture and life could be doubted. That was a great moment for Europe and for the planet, because he was rediscovering what Krishna saw, what Buddha saw, what the great yogis saw, for example. He was discovering it as a mathematician. He's saying, I am to live my life and beliefs, even with mathematics. 2 + 2 = 4 in this space is still cut off from the source. So if you're de-sourced in your psychology and your ontology and your reason, if your reason is de-sourced, it is subject to, it's infected with doubt. And if it's dubitable, it's not found, you're not in the foundations. So in Descartes' example, in his meditation, 6 meditations, he did guided meditations, 6 of them. In his meditations of first philosophy, to get to the first, he saw that all of this could be doubted. He stepped back and he said, I am. I don't know what I am. He didn't have the information anymore. It wasn't information. It was I aming. And he had to leave this behind. Methodically, that was a great scientific moment. And when Descartes said I am, we didn't see he stepped into the deeper space. And he knew he was in a deeper space, but he didn't know how to articulate. He didn't have single bracket, double brackets to help him say, oh, I'm in the double bracket mind operating process. He was figuring it out. He was groping with it. One thing was clear. If I stayed in the box, in this motherboard, then I will not have any knowledge. All I have is opinion. And it could always be wrong. And a demon could be controlling my mind. And it could all be delusional and deception until I tapped the light of the Logos. And so when he said I am, he crossed. He made the crossing in his meditations. In the second meditation, and then he discovered the infinite being. The third meditation, he says the infinite being must be. I am is dependent on the infinite other, on the source. He was doing beautiful early stage of source science. He was opening up the I am code. But what did we do with Descartes? We couldn't get Descartes here. We had to get him here. We downloaded Descartes into and we beat him up and didn't really give him a fair hearing of going into the meditations. The Descartes' meditations were meditations on first philosophy here. And we pull them back here, which is what we do to all of our great teachers. An example. So when I teach Descartes to my students, with this technology, I show that when Descartes said I am, he crossed out of the box. He left this motherboard temporarily. He knew it was still operating on him, but he says, I'm going to step back and go into the I am. So I hope you're with me and making sense. I'm glad I'm not just going linear. First, okay, now we're going to stop and just go from Socrates and follow one line all the way up to Heidegger. And we're going to go from Buddha all the way up, right, 2500 into Zen. And we're going to go from Krishna and the Upanishads and the great rishis through Shankaracharya into Ramanuja into Aurobindo in the 20th century here. And we're going to go from Moses and Jesus and Mohammed and all the way through in the Christian mystics and the Protestant Reformation and into the Quakers in the 21st century, for example. I could do that separately. But I hope you see the point. To linearize those, first of all, to make the links and connect the dots and say, wow, I didn't realize. Now with source eyes, with source Unum power, I could see that something was driving the dialectic of history, the hidden evolutionary drama from Heraclitus and Parmenides to Socrates to sophistry to Protagoras to Socrates drinking the hemlock and being executed as he challenged the sophists. And who are the sophists? And what is sophistry? And Plato and Aristotle and on, and Aquinas, Augustine, Aquinas, St. Anselm, all the way through. Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, all the way through. What's driving that? Why did Hegel struggle after Kant? What was going on? Because Kant left a problem that said that all we could know is phenomena and not noumena. Noumena is off limits to the mind, says Kant. I'm simplifying. Kant saw, it was brilliant, that we have a transcendental matrix that gives us our phenomena and our experience, and that's what we see and experience, and we can only know here. This is after Descartes. And we cannot know noumena. But Kant struggled with a profound dualism across this line. He saw that if the self were only here, there is no ethics. Because everything causally, the causal laws of science shows that every effect has a cause, and everything I think I make a choice, it was already psychologically, causally determined empirically by the laws of nature and culture and psychology. It's determined by causes. So how can we be free? Where's ethics? Ethics is here. But Kant, so we can't know that. But we're it. My moral self is here, but I can't know it. I can know here, but not there. Well, that left a deep problem. That's why a Hegel would come along and say, no, Geist is moving history. Geist, what's that? Infinite spirit. The infinite source. He's trying to say that the infinite is moving all history and all events. But again, if you don't have this and say Hegel is here, you're going to put Hegel here, and it's going to be Hegel all over again. Any philosopher, teacher, wisdom, scripture, visionary who's really tapping this and we bring it down here, we're blowing it. As we did with Descartes, as we did with Jesus, as we did with Buddha, as we did with yoga and Krishna. If you look at the yoga culture now, in America, yoga has gone mass culture. It's fantastic. It's great. It's beautiful. Why? Because something's going on there in the call to yoga. The source is calling us to find the yoga. How many of the yoga teachers and yoga practitioners are doing yoga here? Or understanding that the essence of yoga is not how you posture your body on the mat with your yoga outfit, with your yoga teacher trainer that's giving you a workout and positioning yourself here. No, a real teacher of yoga is going to help you cross into the zone of Om. That's the essence of yoga. It's not only your body, you have to move your consciousness. You have to move your consciousness as Krishna gave the essence of the science of yoga. Arjuna, you've got to drop and relinquish your samsara technology motherboard that makes you an ego and objectifies into going to the Om where you awaken as an Atman, as a real human. Yoga is a journey of ontology in your mind, to open up the matrix of your mind. That's yoga. And any posture or practice you do is meant to get you into the high matrix, to leave the single brackets motherboard and going into the real motherboard, the source board, the source code. So you look, just for an example, if you look at how many people are practicing yoga, thank God people are doing yoga. It's wonderful. Are we getting yoga? It's beautiful how many people are loving Jesus and are Christians, all of the sects, Baptist, whatever the form, Presbyterian, all of the different sects of Christianity that each claim we got it. How many are really getting Jesus, the double bracket Jesus? I know that may sound severe, and I don't mean to, because I really think we're beautiful people. There's no question we're beautiful people, we're well-intentioned, and it's beautiful that people are loving Jesus. It's beautiful that people are following in Torah the laws of God brought through by Moses. That's beautiful. It's beautiful that people are surrendering to Allah and praying and 5 times a day and observing and doing Ramadan and all of the fasting and discipline. It's beautiful. It's beautiful that people are doing science and trying to get the deeper facts of reality. That's fantastic. And our great composers and artists and musicians and movie makers and dramatists. There's a fantastic genius in we Logo Sapiens. We are Logo Sapiens. Homo sapiens are Logo Sapiens. We're Logo Sapiens. And we need the code, the double bracket code, to come into our mature human form. Because the brilliance of people and the beauty and the courage that we see in so many people daily around us, people who make sacrifices for others and really are doing it not just for their ego needs but for a higher need, that's brilliant. Because this force is operating at every turn in our culture, and people are hungry to make the crossing into happiness and well-being and love and compassion and high culture. People want a real democracy, we the people, where every individual is celebrated in deep diversity and yet with Unum. We can't do it here. There's a war between unity versus diversity here. But when we cross, as Martin Luther King says, I may not get there with you. We're black men, white men, Gentile, Jew. We're going to be together. That's this space. Why? It doesn't it doesn't melt down your diversity. It raises and elevates it up because every person is a unique miracle. So this beauty and genius working through us and looking over 2,500 years, it's an amazing, they're looking at the architecture of the cathedrals and mosques and temples, for example, across the planet and celebrating what is first. It's amazing. And the sacrifices so many people have made to give their lives for the truth is astoundingly beautiful. There's no question about it. So we're beautiful people, and the Logo Sapiens, but we're somehow blocked and deformed, and we're not getting it. And the whole point of source science is to help us call it out and say, wow, we have been stunted and held back in our potential to be a human and to be loving one another in compassion and to be in bliss and happiness and well-being and love and living genius and peak performance as mature human selves here. So it's not enough to just keep even to see the lineage, what's driving the evolution of Europe from Socrates to Heidegger, let us say. What is driving the Buddha tradition from Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha, all the way to Zen? What is driving the rishis of the Upanishads and the great yogi visionaries of the Upanishadic and the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutras of Shankara all the way into Aurobindo in the 20th century? We couldn't see the dots connected. What's driving science to evolve from before Einstein through Einstein and beyond Einstein now? What's driving it? What's driving the American drama from 1776 to all of the blockages we had from making our crossing into America? What's driving that? The source is driving it. The infinite source is moving all events all the time. And imagine if you could just use that double bracket lens, source intelligence, the Unum axiom, and look back at our history, and look at ourselves now, and look at the planet now, across the planet. The European Union, the United Nations, the American democracy. Let's look at Congress. Let's look at the American polis. What's going on inside France? What's going on in Germany? What are the forces in Great Britain? What's going on in the nations of Africa? What's happening in South Africa? What's happening in Brazil? What's going on in Venezuela? What's going on in Rwanda? What's going on in Northern Ireland? Wherever we look, what's going on in Bosnia? Why the Holocaust and genocide and ethnic cleansing and racism and sexism and homophobia? Why? That's our next meditation. I'm going to wrap this up in a moment. It's going to be seen that when we look at the many different symptoms of different breakdowns of malpractice and suffering, obvious human suffering, and when you go into the double bracket medical intelligence, we can see it even more starkly. What a crisis, an abysmal, tragic crisis this is for us to be stalled in this space, which is what we are. What would culture look like if you could really make the crossing together into this matrix of the source code and leave the stunting fragmentation that comes with this motherboard code that cuts us off from our source? The Unum axiom, looking now from this lens, from the global lens, into our human pathologies, can connect dots. And that's what we're going to do in our 18th meditation. And in our 18th meditation, we're not going to leave these themes that what's the barrier of crossing from these two languages, to the matrix of the source to this motherboard matrix. Because here, this matrix can go on ad infinitum. It's a code factory. There's no end to how many codes we can generate in this space, and alternative stories and narratives and paradigms. You can make paradigm shifts, new stories. It has a great wiggle room. Ad infinitum, dot, dot, dot. As we say, add on to infinity. But that ad infinitum is not infinitum. Infinitum is here. The infinite is really here. You need an infinite calculus to handle the encounter with the flow of reality, which is the infinite field. And no process that's ad infinitum, which is finitum. In other words, this is a finitizing technology, and this is an opening up to the infinite interface. And there is no procedure in this box that will get you into the other. That's been known by our great traditions. The Buddha tradition, the yoga tradition, the Christ tradition, the Allah tradition, maturing into Rumi, that wants to meet us in that field. The American way, for example, to get to real democracy, where we, the people, are self-governing in dignity and freedom for all, in genuine ethics and recognition. We're not there. So in our next meditation, we're going to continue to see and call out the matrix of the single brackets motherboard, that it's a motherboard that's holding us captive, and we're colonized people. Cultures are colonized here. And when we make this crossing, we enter human liberation. That's the journey of all of these great traditions, are laboring, the pioneers. Moses, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Socrates, and beyond, are all saying we've got to make the crossing. So I guess I didn't slow down. I went very fast. And I didn't do it in a linear way. I kept juggling beyond. Let's go to Descartes. Let's go to Krishna. Let's go to Buddha. Let's go to, but that's the point. These are not in the box. These traditions, from Socrates to Heraclitus, Socrates to Heidegger, from Moses to Jesus to Mohammed to the Quakers, for example. We could go many different branches, obviously. And Socrates all the way through to Heidegger, all of these lineages, from science, early science to modern frontier of astrophysics, trying to understand the Big Bang, all being driven by this motherboard, but by the Unum code rather. The Unum, they're all laboring at the edge, but they're being driven by the call to source. We haven't seen that. That's new. I keep repeating this. This picture we're getting here, this cosmogram, meditative mandala, is attempting to give us a space to see and reconstitute the whole sense of the human journey in a missing evolutionary drama. This has not been seen before. This is a deep evolutionary drama to see the link across all of those dots across the centuries of this, but then to see that the Buddha tradition and the Christ tradition and the Socrates tradition and the yoga tradition are connected. They're not separate lines, they're interconnected. Why? They're all coming out of the same science. It's the same axiom, the Unum axiom, pluribus axiom, that's allowing us to see for the first time these dots are connected. There's a driver that's moving our human dramas, all of them, all the time, everywhere we look. The source force is calling us in every breath to rise to the source. That's the greatest force in the universe, this infinite force. So when we say the force is with you, the force awakens, as we see in the Star Wars, it's a great metaphor. The force awakens is the double bracket awakens. And that's the journey of history. And that's when we come into our own and mature. And that's our evolutionary drama. And if you're going to follow evolution, this is a missing evolutionary drama. The movement from single bracket matrix to the double bracket source. That's our evolutionary destiny and destination. And so that's what I've been trying to suggest in this meditation. I hope you're able to stay with it, but I hope, and we'll deepen this in the next 18th meditation. If you're willing to come back and stay, I hope you will, because it's very exciting and it's life-changing for us. It's a matter of life and death, because if we stay here, we're unsustainable and we have no choice. The greatest urgency facing humanity is making the crossing into the source code. And no one can tell you, your mother can't tell you and give you your source code, because you have to say, I am. When you learn your way to say I am, you're coding. You're getting the code that's in each of us. Each of us has the infinite code within us. Everything is coded. It cannot not be. Every grain of sand, every grain of human is coded. So when you begin to find your own access word, password into your source, right? And that's what these guided meditations are trying to help us break out of the bindery, the colonized, captured space of smotherboard, mind operating process and word process into the liberation of the source word and source code. And each person has to make her own crossing to find the way to say I am. And when we do that, we become human, fully mature human. We know thyself here. So I hope this is making sense. And what I'd like to do in the follow-up next meditation is to deepen all of this and deepen these lineages that have all been struggling to make the crossing, which is I've been suggesting, and to see, in a way, if you look at these 2,500-year lineages, you'll see that they're struggling with this problem. They were trying to get the double brackets and to disentangle it and get it out of the being captured. If the double bracket is captured in here, it's neutralized. And that's been the case. And so by bringing it out and calling this out, we can now breathe and say, the word of source is a deeper technology. It's a different logic. It's a different science. It's a different space of reason than the space of reason in the box. And now we have a chance. And this is the biggest event facing humanity. So the source ontology, source science, Unum science, which we didn't have. With the source lens, we could see a new science. The source science gives us a deeper evolutionary drama and headlines. We're crossing from single bracket to double brackets. That's the main headline news of the centuries. And what is the greatest tragic headline news when you get into source science? It's this line and this technology. That is the biggest headline facing humanity. We're slashing source. Or use God talk, we're slashing God. And if we slash God, slash source, which is what this is, then we slash each other. So this technology is a slasher. Everything has its identity and separated and broken out. And the Unum continuum gets broken with this technology, and we suffer with fragmentation, polarization, divisions, and abysmal forms of violence. Why? Because this is violent. There's an invisible violence inscribed in the dominant mind-operating matrix that we live in and live under. And it's slashing violence to the source and to our great teachers and to the truth and to reason. And that's the headline news, and that's really killing us. It's stifling us. It's stunting us. It's unsustainable. If you're desourced, you're unsustainable, because source sustains it all. So in the follow-up meditation, I hope you'll join us. And again, I hope you see that I'm very passionate about this. This is huge, and everything turns on it. And everyone has to find a way of seeing, is there a smotherboard ruling my life? Have I looked at that? Have I called it out? Whatever my spiritual orientation or disorientation, or my preferred spiritual practice or activism, am I looking at that? And is there a double bracket space in technology? Can we get that and go into that? Everyone should be asking that. Am I slashing my neighbor and myself with a technology that I'm a good person, I don't want to do that. Are we slashing our kids by putting them as objects and teaching them this? Are we educating our kids to be in this space here and learning to use a slasher to cut us off from source? Or are we upgrading our education into the awakened space of liberal arts, literacy and language and power, knowledge, compassion? I hope you begin to see the enormity of this journey. And so in the next meditation, we'll conclude now and take a break, because I need a break also. In the next meditation, we are going to go and now try to look with Unum eyes, unified eyes, and connect the dots of pathologies across our culture. We're going to use the eyes of the double brackets to look into our human existence and human relations, and how we're raising our children, how we relate to each other, how we conduct our own minds and ourselves. Are we slashing ourselves? Why is there such despair and nihilism and life crises, breakdowns, and opioids and violence and racism and sexism, on and on. Why is that going on? Where does it come from? Why can't we be good, and be in compassion and bliss? We'll see that the motherboard is a source of vast pathologies that we couldn't connect before. Now with the connector, the double bracket rational connector, the source Unum science power, with Unum lens, we could see and connect what was scattered and fragmented in the box. And with source eyes, we can have a deep diagnosis of human pathology, the likes of which we've never seen, and that's evidence of source science. So that's a lot. And we will pick that theme up and continue to deepen all of these themes together. This is not a linear process. This is a meditative, integral, Unum process, wherein it's fractal. And I'm seeking the best I can to speak in a fractal way, in a fractal space, and manifest the double bracket intelligence in this meditative journey. Thank you so much for staying with me. And do come back, and we're going to the 18th meditation together and look into the depth of pathologies. Thank you.